So there's a new single-player adventure game on the horizon, and from the footage alone, it looks ambitious. You'll see large-scale combat, deep traversal, open-world systems, and then quiet moments, fishing by a pond, petting a dog, or just taking in the world. Then suddenly, you're being chased down by beasts, or hunted as a wanted criminal. You'll even see ideas that don't normally share the same space. Mech suits framed against medieval castles and with dragons overhead. That's where it gets interesting, because ambition like this can go two very different ways. So instead of overselling it or tearing it apart before it's even out, I want to focus on what's actually being shown, what the developers themselves are saying, and what this game is generally trying to be. This is Crimson Desert, launching on March the 19th. And right now, it's one of the most fascinating unknowns in the modern gaming development, especially coming from a studio behind Black Desert Online, who this time are stepping away from their well-known MMO style and into a fully single-player, narrative-driven action-adventure.
The continent of Pywell. A land soaked in blood by the battles of those who seek peace and those who seek to shatter it. Here begins the saga of the Grey Maids.
The open-world adventure of Crimson Desert unfolds on the continent of Pywell, a sprawling land where multiple factions vie for supremacy. In this war-torn realm, players take on the role of Cliff Macduff, a seasoned mercenary and the leader of the Grey Maids. Pywell itself is more of a backdrop and a seamless, diverse continent said to be larger than Skyrim and Red Dead Redemption 2, where medieval villages, deserts, mountains, and floating sky islands exist alongside dragons, mechanical suits, and other marvels. The game's world is supported by a dynamic weather, destructible environment, and rich details, creating a world that reacts to storms, changing skies, and your own actions. It's a tale about reclaiming what was lost and shaping a future in the land where magic, technology, and political intrigue collide. So at a glance, it's easy to assume Crimson Desert is just another fantasy action game. Swing a sword, dodge, and repeat, and yes, you can play it that way, but the gameplay tells a very different story once you slow it down. What really defines it isn't the difficulty, it's choice. Nearly every system is built around giving you multiple ways to approach the same situation. The combat doesn't lock you into a strict rhythm. There are no flashing prompts telling you exactly when to counter, and actions naturally flow into one another. You can move from a sword combo straight into a slow motion bow shot and roll out into a grapple and launch yourself back into the fight using magic jumps. None of this is mandatory, and you don't need to wrestle every enemy or weave magic into every encounter, but if you want to, the system supports it. That's also why the trailers can feel overwhelming, because Pearl Abyss has been open about the fact that most demos show off a version of Cliff that's nearly at his peak. You're not seeing the learning curve along the way, seeing the end result instead, and with the full game, the progression is slower, more deliberate, and movement comes first, combat depth follows, and the systems begin to overlap, turning each encounter from scripted moments into expressive ones. That philosophy carries over into boss fights as well. They have patterns and weaknesses, but they're rarely one correct answer. You can play cautiously, aggressively, or even use the environment to your advantage. Traversal reinforces that idea too. The world isn't meant to be walked across, it's meant to be used. Climbing, vaulting, gliding, swinging, and eventually flying, with vertical spaces and floating abyss zones that feel closer to puzzle environments than traditional open world terrain. Then there are mounts, such as horses at first, then bears, dinosaurs, dragons, and even a mech. On paper, that sounds ridiculous, but these aren't tools you can just spam. They're gated, limited, and positioned as a power spike rather than a default solution, which helps keep the balance intact. And not everything is combat. You can fish, cook, rest, take bounties, cause trouble in town, or deal with a world that actually reacts to those choices. One moment you're taking in the scenery, the next you're being chased through the streets. And here's the thing that really stood out to me. What is Crimson Desert actually trying to be? Is this one of those games reaching for the sun, an Icarus story where ambition melts its own wings? Or are we only looking at a small, very loud slice of experience? That question comes up for a good reason, because a lot of the footage we've seen looks overwhelming. Destructible environments, elemental reactions, full-scale sieges, skydiving, parkour, bounties, combat systems stacked on top of combat systems, and yeah, on the surface, that's a fair thing to worry about. But this is where the developers have actually been very clear. Most demos and showcases are not showing an early game character. They're showing a version of Cliff where roughly 70% of his abilities have already been unlocked. In other words, we're seeing the game near the mechanical ceiling, not how it actually starts out. In the full experience, progression is much slower and more deliberate. Systems are introduced gradually, abilities are earned, and mechanics are layered, not just dumped on the player all at once. All of this isn't meant to be flashy gimmicks, they're actually meant to function as tools. Imagine each encounter is designed more like a sandbox than a scripted puzzle. You're not told to solve the fight in their way, you're given the options and allowed to decide for yourself. So with how much is packed into this game, it does explain why it's taken so long. The first trailer for Crimson Desert showed up back in 2019 or 2020, and even then it was clear that the game had already been in development for quite some time. Since then it's gone quiet, and then reappeared with a major demo and picked up several delays along the way. That alone is enough to make people feel uneasy. We've all been burned before. Think Cyberpunk, a game that's generally great today, but launched before it was ready because pressure won. For a long time now, the industry trend has been sell now and fix later. So it's fair to ask, what is actually happening here? Well, when you stop and look at the timeline, the delays around Crimson Desert tell a more specific story. Early on, the game wasn't even positioned as what it is today. It was originally described as a prequel tied to Black Desert Online, and it was even meant to be an MMO, and over time, Pearl Abyss refocused it into a fully standalone single-player adventure. That kind of identity shift alone can add years to development. The first major delay came in 2021, where Pearl Abyss said they needed more time to incorporate new ideas, expand the scope, and ensure the health and safety of the team. Later delays were tied to refinement, polishing systems, coordinating a truly multi-platform release, and localization, voice work, and console certification. These weren't silent delays, they came with explanations. And while this doesn't guarantee success, as ambition can still collapse under its own weight, it so far looks less of a rushed to ship and more like an attempt to make sure everything actually holds together and not just mended with cheap glue. So the real question isn't just how long Crimson Desert took, it's whether all that time results in a cohesive experience. And the best way to find that out is to look at its foundation. Because Crimson Desert isn't being built on a familiar engine. This isn't another Unreal Tech demo. Pearl Abyss built their own technology for this game, a custom engine called BlackSpace. That gives them freedom, but it also means they're responsible for everything. Lighting, physics, world streaming, performance, they need to handle it all. But luckily, it has already been shown running publicly on the floor at AMD's CES 2026 booth. According to Digital Foundry, who saw it firsthand, the game was running at native 4K on a system using a high-end AMD CPU and GPU. And even though this was an older version of the game, it was already doing some genuinely impressive things. The lighting systems used a custom global illumination system, mixing ray tracing elements with traditional techniques, strong indirect lighting, solid reflections, and great asset streaming. But one of the most surprising elements wasn't the lighting at all, it was the water. Instead of a simple animated surface, Crimson Desert appears to use a particle-based water simulation, with actual flow, varying height, and real interaction with the world around it. That kind of system is very expensive, and almost never gets used on this scale. Now, none of this guarantees perfect performance. Even in demos, frame rates appeared closer to around 40 to 50 FPS range at native 4K on the 9070 XT, and that was a purely visual estimation. The final release is expected to support upscaling and frame generation technologies, which could make a huge difference, especially on PC. What I appreciate though is that Pearl Abyss didn't take the easy route. They built technology specifically to support the kind of systems the game wants to have. It was risky, but I generally think it might pay off. I still remember seeing the game for the first time and the way the wind moved through the trees and the way the landscape felt almost lifelike. Back then, there really wasn't much else like it. Sure, other games have caught up visually since then, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, but something about Crimson Desert still stands out. And I don't know about you, but I'm genuinely excited about this one. Whether Crimson Desert sticks the landing or not, it's something we'll know once it's finally in our hands. But it's shaping up to be a fascinating adventure either way. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are you excited, cautious, or somewhere in between? If you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more honest coverage as we get closer to launch, including performance analysis, gameplay impressions, and deeper dives once it's out, consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel and allows me to keep making videos of this kind for you. And as always, a huge thank you to everyone supporting the channel on Patreon. If you're planning to pick up Crimson Desert or any other game, you can check it out on my instant gaming link in the description for competitive pricing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers everyone.